Okay, so I will introduce Richard Whittaker, who is the editor of Words and Conversations.
Works.
Works and Conversations at his magazine. And I've known about Richard for a long time and was hoping he would interview me. So here we are.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Oh, it's a lovely little intimate circle. So it's, how many of you have her book, Full Circle? You've seen that? Anybody? No. Well, do you sell copies?
I do.
I would suggest getting a copy. It's. I was amazed. I don't know Mary that well.
Mary Curtis.
Mary Curtis.
Thank you.
That's so unlike the way we do names, and I am getting used to it slowly.
Good.
But it does give an added aspect, Mary Curtis. Okay, so I found that book just fascinating by this man, Little John, who I don't know who he was, but I was told he was a wonderful, special person.
Yeah, he was a professor at UC Berkeley in the journalism department and a very dear friend. And one night at dinner, I got up the courage after a couple of months to say, David, would you mind writing a paragraph or two about my work? And he said, I'd be delighted. And so he wanted everything, my whole career, and he kept researching and doing all these things. And he wrote this wonderful book, and it came out maybe, 5 or 6 years ago, I think. And so anyway, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Oh, it's quite a read, and you have had an amazing life. Reading that, there's way more than we'll even touch on. But I thought I would ask you, I like to ask people, I like to go back because it's very interesting to me, and I think to others, to learn a little bit about the roots. And I was struck by your parents. Well, you were born in Chicago, is that right?
That's right, yeah, Chicago.
And your parents, I gather, were culturally aware in some way.
Yes, they were, yeah.
And so so you were exposed early on to some arts and culture. Would you talk a little bit about your parents and what they contributed in terms of your art life?
Right. My parents were Midwesterners that had gone to really good schools. My mother went to Smith and my father went to the University of Chicago, and they were very intellectual, very tweedy. They were Francophiles, they were Anglophiles. They also drank a lot. So you had that kind of overlay of living with alcoholics, having an alcoholic parent. And so they also were very cultured. I mean, we lived near Cranbrook Institute, so we would go to Cranbrook and see the Kingswood and Cranbrook, the two schools, do all the Gilbert and Sullivan plays. Each year they do a new Gilbert and Sullivan opera. We went to films there. I saw that film Crème Blanc, White Mane, about the stallions in the south of France when I was probably about 7 or 8. We went to Chicago. We went to the Art Institute in Chicago. When I was 9, my mother and brother and I traveled from Kalamazoo, Michigan, and took the train all the way to Manhattan, where we went to the Metropolitan. We went to see Swan Lake, and I was in ballet class at the time. And I was thinking, I will not stop dancing until I can leap across the stage like that. Well, it never happened. But it was really great. And they were into great books. A club, they studied all, Aristotle and Socrates and all that kind of stuff. They were very, very intellectual. And And they couldn't understand me being an artist. They didn't get that. My mother, however, made things. She made all my clothes. I never had a store-bought dress. She had her little Singer sewing machine, and just before she died, I had the pleasure of telling her that she taught me how to design. She did. She said, "I did not." I said, "Yes, you did." We would go to the fabric store in Birmingham, Michigan. We would pick out a Butterick, a McCall's, or Simplicity fabric pattern. We would go look at the fabric. We would get the buttons, the zippers, the rick-rack, whatever we needed. We'd go home. You would spread your cutting board out on the floor. You put the fabric down and pin the pattern to the fabric. You'd cut it out in your with your little pinking shears. You would take it over. You'd sew it up on your trusty little Singer sewing machine. I said, "You made a three-dimensional object. It happened to be a dress." And finally, I got through to her. And I said, and Granddad was an engineer, and I used to look at the blueprints that he was building an addition on his cottage. And so I just grew up with them taking me and my brother to museums and concerts and plays. And I just realized, you know, I appreciate it more and more as I get older.
Yeah.
And also my father had a beautiful tenor voice, and he knew about 125 folk songs. And so after he mixed a couple of martinis, he would, and I would be in the other room listening. Is it safe to go near him? Is it safe? And I would go through the door and I would start singing with him. And it was really wonderful. He changed. He metamorphosized into from having his temper tantrum when she came through the door after work, going upstairs, changing his clothes, and then he changed into the nice Ken Ratcliff. And he was safe, and so I would go in and I would sing with him. It was great, you know.
Well, you've referenced alcoholism, and I think that would be a possible conversation, but I don't think I want to go there because we have too much other stuff. But that's interesting to
That's
note.
Enough. Yeah.
It's interesting to note.
Yeah.
And so that's a great little sort of feeling. It's surprising, isn't it? How much we get from our parents, and in my case, and anyway, it took a long time to understand what I got from my mother. But the more you said you appreciate things more and more. I mean, you see how much one gets from both parents.
Yes.
Indelibly.
Yeah.
At great, unbelievable depth, right?
Yeah.
And so, jumping forward to your college experiences.
Right,
So I understand you went to a college near Boston as an undergrad.
Yeah, I went to a college at that time. There's first I started out, because academically I was zip. You know,
Zip?
You know, I just didn't get it. I didn't get math, I didn't get algebra, I didn't get Latin, I didn't, you know, I was just, so my parents didn't know what to do with me, because my brother was so smart, he started getting A's in kindergarten, so they shoved him off to the University of Chicago as when he was 16, and he skipped his senior year in high school. So I can just see them sitting around thinking, well, we got rid of one of them. What are we going to do with this other one? Oh, I know. Let's send her to school in Switzerland. They said, would you like to go to Switzerland?
Oh,
would you like to go to school in Switzerland? I said, yes. So I did. I went my junior and senior year of high school to a Swiss boarding school on the shores of Lac Léman, Lake Geneva.
And is that a French-speaking
Yes,
part?
it's a French-speaking part, and there were about 9 of us dummies from America who didn't speak any French.
Wow. Well, you already had some boldness that you would be willing to do that.
Well, I kind of want to get it away from them, you know, in a way.
I see.
I did. You know, but I was lucky. So I was 15 years old, and I was sent from Kalamazoo, Michigan to Manhattan, met by a family friend who twirled me around Manhattan and up the Empire State Building and down and put me on the Queen Elizabeth. So why not, you know? So I end up in France, and here I am. And my uncle, my mother's younger brother, lived in Paris, so there was somebody there. So he came and got me at the station.
So let's see, junior and senior years is like what, 15, 16?
I was 15,
15.
Yeah.
You end up in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And you don't speak French at that time?
Not at that time, no.
So talk about that. I would be interesting to hear a little bit about your experience there at that school that you...
It was a fascinating school. There were about 60 girls there. They were from all over the world. And that was an education in itself, just to meeting young girls. And I was not smart enough to get their addresses and follow them. I usually do that if I know somebody, I follow them the rest of their life, like David. I met David when he was 4 years old.
Oh my God.
His mom was one of my best friends ever. Beautiful artist. Anyway, so I went to school there, and the first semester, trimester, I had two Swiss German roommates. Okay, now I didn't speak Swiss German, they didn't speak English, I didn't speak French, and they spoke a little bit of French. So we just stared at each other the whole time. It was very weird, very surreal. And so I would go to sleep with them speaking Swiss German, and I don't know if any of you know that. It's much harsher than High German, and them handing me pieces of Swiss chocolate.